one other very concrete thing that I learned is that as much as you can, bring people into the program at the design phase. So what I had mentioned to you about the site emissions challenge, and that we initially had talked about 3%, and then we also allowed sites to do a percentage of throughput. That was something that was brought to us as an idea. So when we were designing the program, we created a team. We call it a champions team. And so we brought in kind of one person from each site and said, okay, we're thinking about running this program. What do you think? And would this work? Would this be something that people would be interested in? That's really helpful, because then they said, well, no, like this number isn't going to work. We should measure it this way. It's really useful to like bring the people who are going to eventually be the ones taking on the program and have them help you design it. It helps you design a better program, and then it helps them kind of also feel a bit of ownership. Like once you do then release it, then they're like, oh, I was part of designing this program. I'm gonna get my team up and running on this, and they've already been giving some thought to how they could do that.
Welcome back to the Decarb Connect podcast. I'm going to do just a little bit of an intro to our sponsor before I introduce our guest today. I think some of you will know that our series is sponsored by our production partner, Jano Media. They were actually the team that suggested we launch our podcast, and it is definitely true to say that their support has really been pretty fundamental in helping us connect with listeners, meet new people in the ecosystem, and just sort of make sure that we're really producing content that's of value to people. So thank you, Jano. And with that bit of admin out of the way, this week I'm joined by Eva Musso, who is Head of Sustainability and Government Relations for BASF Canada. Now, I know that many of you will understand what BASF is, but for those who don't, I think it's best described as really one of the biggest global chemical manufacturers that we have, and one that has been doing quite a lot of work in different regions around sustainability and decarbonisation. So having Eva this is going to be great. We're going to be able to sort of tap into some really interesting projects and focus points that she's leading. And with that intro, Eva, can I ask you, tell us a little bit about how you've arrived at this point in time, both your personal route in as well as the BASF route in, and what it means for how you're approaching your role. And then we will talk a little more about the sustainability focus and some of the projects you're working on.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here. So thanks for having me. And thanks for the intro. I would say I first learned about kind of environmental science in grade 12 in high school in science class. And it was really like a switch flipped. I knew immediately that that was going to be what I had to do, what I was going to do. So I followed that path. I studied environmental studies in university, and I really started to learn the concept of sustainability. So up until then, I had been studying environmental science, but really started thinking about the triple bottom line and this concept of thinking about economy, environment, and people at the same time. I then, after university, started working in government and really working with businesses and with even industry associations that were interested in going beyond compliance. And so people who wanted to do the right thing and be environmental leaders and go beyond what they had to do by law. So I started kind of working, I was in government, but working with businesses. And then outside of government, I was trying to explore all of my interests. I was volunteering in sustainable fashion. I was volunteering at an organization that was looking at women's health and how it's affected by the environment. I was working with restaurants to help them reduce waste. I taught at a college in green business management for a while. So eventually I found this great opportunity at BASF that sort of married, because it was government relations, which I had a lot of experience in, and then sustainability, which I was very passionate about. And as corny as it sounds, I just felt like everything that I had done in my life had really led me to this point. And I really was excited about the opportunity at BASF. And when I started at BASF, in my first week there, because, leaving government where you feel like you're on the right side, and then you're going to this chemical company, and there's part of you that's like, what am I doing here? But BASF is truly, truly committed to sustainability. My first week there, I was in the leadership team meeting, and there was the CFO was the person really championing something related to sustainability and plastic pollution, and I really. And then that same week, I attended 2 employee-led sessions. One was about Indigenous relations, and one was about, race relations. And I thought, I've really landed in the right place. This is where I need to be. And that, to your question about how I approach my role, this is really in my mind, sustainability is really something that has to be done by everybody. There can't be one person, one leader. While there's a focal point, it really has to be something about who we are and the way we think, and it has to be done by everyone and always. And that's how I approach the role.
Well, I think that's a really incredible intro. I mean, I love this picture of you as someone who has both hands on kind of what it means to affect change in government, but also in corporates, but also those outside interests you talked about that must have been quite inspiring, I think, and perhaps challenging to some of your original thoughts around what sustainability meant. So a couple of weeks ago, when we had our first kind of chat about what we might focus on today, it was really clear to me that you were incredibly passionate about, well, it kind of ties back into what you were just saying, really, about the engagement of employees, the engagement of stakeholders in this sustainability mission that BASF is developing. Tell me a bit about, I mean, you've already hinted at it there, about why you think it's important that everyone else is engaged, but why? Yeah, tell me a bit more about
Okay, sure.
and
I
you're
mean, yeah.
thinking.
Sorry, yes. As I was saying, and kind of as you've also hit on, I mean, I think really employee engagement is really important to me. It's an important part of sustainability for me personally, and then for BSF as well. So, BSF's tagline is "We create chemistry for a sustainable future." So, sustainability is really a part of its core, and then obviously people are part of the core. So, as I was saying, I feel like sustainability has to be something that everyone, or at least almost everyone, is taking on almost a daily basis, really, in every decision that they're making at work. So, I mean, for businesses, it's not completely altruistic, of course, right? There's an element of retention and recruitment that we're spending the bulk of our lives at work, and we want that to mean something. Most of us don't want it just to be a place where we go, put in our hours to get a paycheck. We want purpose. And I think that's really important. So for me, working for a company where sustainability and positive impact and goals that go beyond the bottom line is important. And I think BSF has a lot of ways that people can get involved in sustainability. I know we're going to jump into some of them, but there are a lot of opportunities to get involved in sustainability work. We've really created a well-rounded program for people to, share ideas either personally or professionally that really contribute to sustainability, to a sustainable future.
Is it relatively easy to sort of join the dots for your management team and others, about the impact that this kind of work does? And then we will dive into one of the particular programs you're working on.
I mean, I think so. I think so. I hope that people see it as easy. I think we really tried to build a culture where you're encouraged to take sustainable actions at home and in your personal life as well. It's totally voluntary. You're never, pushed, but you're recognized and rewarded. And I think that's the important part, right? It's a carrot. And I think even if you're not mentally saying, okay, this is, here's the line, here's the dot, and here's the line, it's just becoming part of who you are.
Yeah. I agree. I think also what's interesting for all of us who employ people, whether a small business like Decarb Connect or a huge employer like BASF, the reality is that the generations coming up see this as integrated for the most part in their world anyway. So it's
Mhm.
less of a kind of, oh, we're talking about this, they're already fully engaged. But let's have a look at one of the initiatives. And again, on the prep call, you were talking about the Sustain You program. So give a little background to this. What was the context for its creation and some of the goals?
Sure. So Sustain You was launched it by BSF in 2022, and three main goals. So first was really to educate. So that was to ensure that employees really understand sustainability and the importance of it. So, competitions, events, articles, videos, we were really trying to educate employees about topics, everything from water conservation, solar power, reducing food waste, traveling more sustainably, which was new to a lot of people. The second goal, then, of course, was to engage them and encourage them to take proactive actions. So we provided a lot of suggestions. I think that's key too, because people feel these are overwhelming concepts, right? Climate change or sustainability, and I'm just one person. And you really have to have that call to action that says, well, you can eat less meat, or you can take a shorter shower, and really show them how that's connected to the big picture. And then the third goal was really to recognize employees. So if you're taking the great actions, we want to really, celebrate that. And so every time an employee would complete an action or participate in a campaign, they would receive participation points. The points then would be tallied at the end of the year, and they would receive what we call recognizing you points. And those are points that you can redeem on a website, that you can redeem for physical items or gift cards, sort of like Air Miles used to be, that you could kind of go in and choose your gifts from the catalog. So we have that program as well, recognizing you, and you would get recognizing you points for the Sustain You program. And there were other things people got, virtual recognition badges, and they could add them to their background in videos. And there was also an opportunity to have like a virtual meet and greet with leadership. There was a gift card toward breakfast or lunch with your team. So there were a lot of ways that people were really being recognized and celebrated for taking the right actions. So I mean, the driver, again, the driver was really about living our strategy. So, sustainability being at the core, we really wanted people to embrace that. And as I was saying to you, it was about making those choices becoming ingrained, and in your personal life, of course, and that's really, I think it's really key to stress that these were actions people were taking at home. This was about bringing sustainability into your personal life that people were getting recognized and rewarded for. And the idea behind that is that once that becomes core to your personality, that then influences the decisions you're making at work.
Mm. And tell me a bit about the response then. So you mentioned this started in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Like how quickly did you see that engagement, and what's come out of it since?
Yeah, well, I think people were very excited. I was pleasantly surprised, because you think everyone's busy and no one's going to take this on. And of course, a little friendly competition and a little bit of recognition and reward, of course, drives people, and that's great. And I want to just stress this was a North American program, so I'll tell you some stats, but they're going to be based on the whole of North America, and then I'll tell you some Canadian ones, because BASF has a much smaller footprint in Canada than it does in the US. So you were saying earlier that it's quite a large company, and it is. It's about 120,000 employees worldwide, 1,200 of whom are in Canada. So just to give you a bit of scale there. So yeah, pleasantly surprised with how many people got involved. And as I was saying before, I think the fact that they were taking these small actions, that they felt connected them to large issues, really got people motivated. So in North America, we had about 2,000 employees registered, and those employees performed over 125,000 actions. So through the program, we reduced 1.7 million pounds of CO2. So that's equivalent to taking 3 railroad cars of coal off the charts, I guess. 1.6 kilowatts of energy. So that's enough to power New York City for 15 minutes, which is scary when you think about it. And over 97,000 pounds of waste. So that's 43 dumpsters worth of trash. In Canada, about 300 people, so not bad, considering we have an employee base of 1,200, and they're doing a variety of jobs, and some are working at plants and that, and 15,000 actions. So we had about 194,000 pounds of CO2 saved. So it's equivalent to taking 18 cars off the road for a year, and reduced nearly 13,000 pounds of waste. So it's 5 dumpsters worth of trash, and we saved 22 trees. So that's pretty cool.
And I mean, it's really fascinating to think about the number of actions, the number of things that have come out of those those groups of employees that engage with this. This is, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but can you see that those people are now kind of engaging more at the corporate level as well in sustainability, or is that kind of next step of the project, or how does that kind of follow on seem to be shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to measure. I mean, I think that's, it would be great if we could know that, if we could have a direct link between, okay, you did this thing at home, and now have you taken that to work with you? I don't know how we could measure that link. I think we are seeing that, sustainability at work is very popular, and hopefully that's also motivated by these programs that we're engaging employees in. So I think, and vice versa. Like, I think the fact that Sustain You and other employee programs have been so popular might be, it's circular. So hard to measure, but I think that the link is there, but that would be anecdotal. Yeah.
So, well, let's have a look at a different kind of project then, that you've been running with staff that is more directly linked into the business as a whole. So I know you have kicked off a site emission reduction challenge. Give us the kind of context for that and how long that's been going, and Yeah, what do you see as the
Sure.
impact?
Yeah, sure. So we launched that in March 2023, and that was a Canadian program. So we launched that here. It was a year-long program. It was a site emission reduction challenge, and again, it was really based on this idea that you do a healthy competition among sites. So right, who can do the best emission reduction project? So they were challenged to come up with projects that were going to reduce something related to their Scope 1 or Scope 2 emissions compared to a 2021 baseline. And then sites, of course, could do either actual numbers or throughput results. So if they were growing as a site, then they didn't have to necessarily reduce the absolute number. They could do it as a percentage of their throughput. So when the sites were undergoing the challenge, we give them lots of support. We did workshops, we had brainstorming sessions, we brought in experts from similar sites in the US to talk about what they had done to reduce their carbon footprint. So we really tried to give people a platform and an opportunity to get involved in emissions reduction. Our Cornwall site in Ontario was the challenge winner. So they actually submitted 4 projects that focused on process optimization, including efficient boiler control, which would help them reduce natural gas consumption. And interestingly, the 4 projects, or that one project, only cost them $500 a year to implement. $500 total to implement, and contributed to 5% reduction in site emissions. So that's huge. We really challenge people to think about these kind of low cost but super
That's
impactful.
incredible, though.
Yeah, yeah,
$500 to have that kind of impact.
yeah,
So, sorry, I caught part of it, but what was that particular?
yeah. So
Um,
it a boiler efficiency around boiler control, and that helped them to reduce their natural gas consumption by 5%. So yeah, really something incredible, and didn't cost them that much money to implement. So altogether, the 4 projects helped them reduce about 470 tons of CO2. So yeah, that was we were really happy with that. And then of course we recognized them and celebrated them. We had articles, and we went out there, brought the leadership team out there, had lunch, brought lunch for everyone, and brought presents and sustainability themed gifts. I should just be clear about that. We brought them reusable water bottles, and then we worked to help them implement the project. So. And I'll just give a shout out also to our Blackie, Alberta site, which also had some great ideas. They were kind of the second place, I guess. So their proposal included a project to install motion sensors to reduce the light consumption. So that was controlling they had already been using LEDs, but the motion sensors really helped to even reduce that further. So yeah, so we were really proud and excited about the uptake. I mean, again, same thing. People are busy, and a lot of times, taking something on, um, even for site managers, and even if it would make their processes more efficient, it's sometimes just a bit of a nice to have. So this was great to really rally people behind the cause of sustainability. And like you said, it was bringing it into work. And what I learned through that challenge is, as we were saying, it isn't that people are not interested. People are very interested in being more sustainable for a variety of reasons, right? It makes their lives easier. It's more efficient. It's less expensive. And so, yeah, so there was I felt anyway, anecdotally, as I said before, that there was a link between what we were doing to engage employees and then bringing those ideas to work.
well, we'll come back maybe at the end of our conversation to sort of talk about what you would advise others and maybe how you would even construct these types of things differently, given what you saw happen. But I'm sure there must have been a load of lessons learned. But we now want to move on to another kind of project that you have brought into the business, which is the Decade of Action contest.
Mm-hmm.
So again, same question.
Yeah.
What and why, and what has
Yeah.
come out of this?
Yeah. So this was another one that was exciting. So this is a program that I had, it's when you talk about lessons learned. So I had run a similar program at a previous role in the government, and really learned that we had a kind of just an open like green ideas campaign, and we were flooded with ideas, but a lot of them were kind of off the wall ideas. It was like, paint all the cars green, so when we're out on the streets, people know we're green. It's like, well, that's not actually green, right? So this was we started this contest, the Decade of Action, and we set a lot of parameters around it. Okay, if you have an idea, think it through. Like, well, how much is it going to cost? Ballpark it. How many employees is this going to take to implement? What's the impact going to be? So we did put some parameters around it, which is something I had learned from when I did it the first time. Yeah, so we did this initiative. We put out this Decade of Action. We asked for ideas at work, things that could be done at the site or the plant that you worked at. the office, whatever it may be. And again, I think all these ideas, all these campaigns are connected. I know it sounds like we're talking about all these different campaigns, but they're really all connected. We're really talking about bringing sustainability to work in ways that we can make an impact. So we launched Executive Action after Sustain You around the same time as the Site Emissions Challenge. It was an open invitation for employees to share their best ideas and projects, and again, really gave them that opportunity to shine, to be recognized for the work that they were doing. So they had thematic areas, and then we put it to an employee vote. So once we had narrowed them down a little bit, we had a third party consultant who did the first kind of culling, I guess, of ideas. And then once we had a few, we put them online and gave employees an opportunity to vote, so that way, even if you didn't submit an idea, you could still participate in the campaign. And so everyone had, this kind of ownership, the skin in the game, as people say. And then the person who won, who had got the most votes, or I think the three most popular, then were given an opportunity to present to our senior management team, to our Canadian leadership team. And then those leaders listened to all three pitches and then chose the one that they liked best. So again, for employees that maybe had not done that before and had not had an opportunity to, sit down with the president of the company and share an idea with her, that's also a driver, and that, really motivated, I think, people to participate in the campaign. So the winning idea was from one of our site employees, and again, it was about lighting and power. So it was about limiting the amount of light and power used at the sites by installing motion sensors. So the idea of it and the thinking it through and coming up with how much it would cost, what the impact would be. And it was just a well thought out, well articulated, and impactful project. So that person was the winner of the project, and then we've been working with them to implement that at the site.
And what were the runners up? What were their projects focused on? Was it similar, like power, electricity consumption?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were all about, ways to be more, it was process optimization, right? It was operational efficiency, was those kinds of things. They were all for the most part, they were all around that. I think that our employees really did a great job proposing those projects, and there were three really good, well thought out projects.
So you've kind of given us this really interesting snapshot of the Sustain You program, which is really all about the employee themselves, the Site Emission Reductions Challenge, which obviously is way more about the kind of the sites that are actually developing product for BASF, and then similarly the Decade of Action. What do you think these have done? And I'm sure that this is also, it's hard to be scientific about the impact of programs like this, but as a group of projects, what do you sense the shift has been in terms of culture, or in terms of contribution, or questions, or whatever it might be around sustainability? What is it that you see, and what else do you think is yet needed to keep moving it forward?
Yeah, I think, there's a progression of the ideas. As you said, the Sustain You is really about personal ideas, and the Decade of Action was about still personal. It was very individual, but it was about the workplace. And then the other one, the Site Emissions Challenge, was a collective. You work together with the team at your site to come up with what the project would be. So there was kind of a building there. And I think, as I was saying before, it sort of becomes ingrained and becomes core to who you are. The other thing is, when you look at a campaign like Sustain You, some of the ideas were things that people maybe hadn't thought of. So, unplug your chargers when you're not using them. And some people would say, well, why? Like, what's so the important part of that is understanding why you do that. So, it's phantom energy, and the charger is still drawing power even when it's not in use. So people didn't, or sustainable tourism, or the connection between eating less meat and climate change. So in part it was that learning, it was that. So it's interesting to have conversations with people that were like, oh, I didn't even think about that, and I took this cruise a few years ago and I never thought about the impact that I was having on marine life. Or so it really creates that thought process around sustainability. And I think that has, it just really built into the culture, has really created, at least, like I said, it's hard to measure, but anecdotally, I feel like it's really generated the buzz and the excitement around sustainability. And I think when, as I was saying off the top, it's important to create a culture. Like, sustainability to me isn't something that, oh, we have this one team doing it. It's not like payroll, right? You have people doing it and they're doing it for everybody. Sustainability isn't that. I mean, I really think it's important that everyone's taking it to heart, especially, I'm not at the sites. So the sites have to be, they're the ones on the front lines, right? They're the ones who have to really be taking these decisions with sustainability in mind. And so it's important that they understand why, that they see the big picture, that they see themselves personally and professionally involved in it, and how it can, yes, of course, drive a company toward better efficiency, saving money, and reaching their goals. And they can do that for you personally as well.
Okay, well, we've sort of looked at the employee base and how you've been engaging them, both in North America and in Canada in particular,
Mhm.
in sustainability. Let's turn our attention now to a different kind of stakeholder, which are the partnerships, the external groups that
Mhm.
you engage with, and again, why? What
Right.
there's some very obvious why engage with your suppliers or partners, drive efficiency or cost, but I'm kind of interested to explore again a couple of the projects that you had in place and the impact they've had. So let's start with I guess like how do you go about partnering with external organizations? And you told me ahead of time that there are two in particular of the ones that we talked about that would be good to sort of summarize on this podcast. One was a partnership with Bullfrog Power,
Mhm.
and one with Iron and Earth, very different organizations.
Mhm.
Perhaps you could just give a brief overview, but then talk to me about how, how do you do that? How do you set up those partnerships? And what is key to balancing both the corporate thing you need through them, like the
Yeah.
delivery of something, with broader sustainability objectives? Because ultimately, BASF Canada, BASF globally is a for-profit.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it is about balance. So that's quite a big question I've just flung your
Yeah.
way.
Yes, and I will just say that the Bullfrog Power and the Iron and Earth project we did together. So interestingly, we brought those two very different stakeholders, as you say, into the same project. So the Bullfrog Power one, we are a customer of theirs, and as you say, the reason why we're a customer is because we're trying to offset our emissions and reach our targets for carbon reduction. So how do you go from being a customer to being a partner? So basically, when we signed the contract that we're currently in with Bullfrog Power, we had said originally we would like a portion of our payment to make a difference. So obviously, the whole payment makes a difference, and we love Bullfrog Power, and we're really proud of what we're doing there. We're offsetting the carbon emissions, but we appointed a part of the spend to be supporting local community owned projects. So Iron and Earth, I think Bullfrog Power was very helpful in that they kind of scouted out some organizations that they thought were really playing in this sphere of like community built energy and community owned energy. So Iron and Earth was working on reskilling. They have various programs, but the one we were involved in was helping reskill workers within the energy sector. So this project that we supported was in Alberta, and it was working with Masquachis people in the community college. So they developed a curriculum around reskilling workers in the renewable energy space, and through the program, they also built a small wind turbine and some solar panels for the community college. So that's the kind of program I think we really wanted. You know, we're working with Bullfrog. We're doing this great thing around our own emissions, and we wanted just a small piece of that to be about empowering the local community. And we tied that back into our Indigenous relations work by doing it with a specific group of people, community people. So to your question of how, I mean, I think, we're motivated to do it. I think the important thing is to sit down with the stakeholders. In that case, we got Bullfrog and Iron Earth around the table several times before we actually went out and did anything. It's really important to have that conversation, to sit down and say, okay, these are three different organizations that everybody has different goals. And even though we're on common ground, we're working towards something, we're all doing it for slightly different reasons. And it's important to sit down at the beginning and be transparent and say, this is where I'm coming from, this is where you're coming from, and where do we meet, and how do we measure success at the end of this? So I would say transparency, and then establishing that shared vision would be how you start, and then accountability. So yeah, you've built this community, and then what? You've built you've taught these people something, and then what do they do with it? So I think transparency, accountability, and then really just sitting down and understanding people's perspective.
The iron and earth element of that, is that an ongoing relationship, or was it via Bullfrog for a period of time? How do you sense that will develop?
Yeah, so we are still in conversation with Iron and Earth. We haven't engaged them yet for any other specific projects, but we talk about things we could do together, and particularly with and we haven't talked about this much, but I also do Indigenous relations, and we're on our journey to truth and reconciliation, and that's the field of concern for Iron and Earth, and so we have talked about ways we could involve them as we go forward into the future.
Let's again take just a slight tilt again
Mhm.
into different stakeholder engagement programs. So clearly, BASF has a huge supply chain, very
Yeah.
extensive. How on earth, when you look at the range of people engaged in the wider supply chain, how do you go about getting real and measurable outcomes from that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, I mean, I shouldn't, yeah, I'll be interested to hear what you say because I'm assuming you have to somehow identify those that can have a bigger impact and will rather than go for everybody.
Right. Yeah, I think, we do have a big supply chain and a complex one. I think BASF has several business units. And so we do everything from agricultural products to automotive refinishing to personal care. And we don't necessarily have all those business units operational in every country. So in Canada, for example, we don't have a personal care division, but we do have an automotive and agricultural and, other divisions here. And so our supply chain is very, very large and very complex. And so I think, we talked about how no one person can solve an issue like this by themselves. And I think that's true of organizations too, right? If you can be great, but if the members of your supply chain aren't doing the right things, then you're also not, globally, we're not going to move the needle. So we have a couple of ways that we're working with. We have a supplier code of conduct. And so that helps us to select suppliers, not just based on economics, but also based on um, are they in compliance with human rights? And this is global. So are they in compliance with human rights? Are they in compliance with labor and social standards, anti-discrimination, anti-corruption policies? Those enable us through that code to look at things beyond economics. So everything, resource efficiency, but also human rights and things like that, transportation, all kinds of things. We expect our suppliers to use their best efforts to implement the standards, and we are working through the United Nations Global Compact Initiative to do that. And they have a we're also part of the Responsible Care program here and in many countries. In 2011, BASF came together with other companies to create this Together for Sustainability initiative. So again, this idea that we can't do this alone, let's do this together. So together we created a global standard for supplier evaluations and auditing. And that helps because you almost have like this pre-vetted situation where you can come to approved vendors for things. So this collaborative approach really helped us kind of to drive forward sustainability in procurement. It also helps, with risk reduction and other things, helps us, and it decreases costs, right? Because once we've done this and vetted a supplier, we don't have to all keep individually doing it. So through this Together for Sustainability program, there were also like ways to learn. So we have this TFS, they call the TFS Academy, which provided multilingual training across all aspects of sustainability, procurement, assessment, et cetera, auditing. And so that helps us, especially now as we're trying to look at scope 3. And that's really about how you work through your supply chain. I mean, scopes 1 and 2 are a little easier to do on your own, but you can't address scope 3 on your own. And through a lot of examples at you there, I apologize if that was, but those are all ways that we're looking at the elements of our supply chain and how we can do better. And, again, as we said, it is a for-profit company, and these are not things we're doing to be altruistic. These things save money, make money. We also are, with the product carbon footprint, we are licensing the software. So other companies that want to do the same thing, want to analyze their products, can do so. So we're working with other companies to get that done. So that's a product that you can, the other companies can use to analyze their products as well.
Do you find when you have an extended supply chain, to some extent, you need those people between you and your end customer to
Yeah.
be as engaged, as able to sell, the relative benefits of sustainability or lower carbon products? Is that a challenge? Is that something that you find people engage with easily? What's your sense of that part of the challenge?
Yeah, actually, thank you for that. You've hit on it. That can be a challenge because you're, um, you've got people who are in sales and they're selling those products. And so, yes, we have this PCF data, but the person who is selling that product really needs to understand what that means. And so there's a huge component of training as well. So, BSF does a lot of, training sessions with salespeople and with other people because you can make these great products, but if they're not marketed, you know, it kind of falls apart, right? And so if you want to focus your sales on those accelerator products that are having a good impact in the carbon footprint, you need people who are out there, having the conversations with customers to really understand what that means and why. And, we talk about scopes, and for us, it's probably something that we have been talking about ad nauseum for years, but some people not, right? Obviously, like there are a lot of people who don't know what scope 3 is versus scope 2 or scope 1. It's a language, it's a whole new language. And so you might have had a career where to date, you haven't needed to be concerned with stuff like that. So now all of a sudden we're changing the rules of the game, and that requires a lot of training of staff people. And there can be with such a large company.
Well, you have walked us through really quite a number of projects and programs. Let's kind of try and whittle it back to some, one or two key points that you think people take from your experiences, like basically advice, I suppose.
Yeah.
So if a listener is looking at engaging either or both internal and external stakeholders,
Yeah.
what is it that you have learned at BASF? Obviously, you brought some experience from government into this already, but what has your takeaway been from this period of time and this really quite broad variety of projects that you have been rolling out? What do you think others could do that would skip out a few of the steps and get a better result or get as good a result?
Um, a couple of things, and one is sort of cheesy. I would say just don't give up. I mean, they don't always work. I've had lots of failures as well as successes, or sometimes you run a program and you think, oh, that was a fantastic program. I wonder why people didn't take it up. And it might have nothing to do with you, right? There might have been something that happened externally or in the economy that affected your program. And, with the best of intentions, it didn't work. But I don't think you should let that stop you, because the next one might. I think one thing, though, one other very concrete thing that I learned is that as much as you can, bring people into the program at the design phase. So what I had mentioned to you about the site emissions challenge, and that we initially had talked about 3%, and then we also allowed sites to do a percentage of throughput. That was something that was brought to us as an idea. So when we were designing the program, we created a team. I think we call it a champions team. And so we brought in kind of one person from each site and said, okay, we're thinking about running this program. What do you think? And would this work? Would this be something that people would be interested in? That's really helpful, because then they said, well, no, like this number isn't going to work. We should measure it this way. And I would have never thought of that. So I have found in my career, in launching these programs, it's really important and it's really useful to like bring the people who are going to eventually be the ones taking on the program and have them help you design it. It helps you design a better program, and then it helps them kind of also feel a bit of ownership. Like once you do then release it, then they're like, oh, I was part of designing this program. I'm gonna get my team up and running on this, and they've already been giving some thought to how they could do that. So those would be my two pieces of advice: is just don't give up when things, when a program falls flat, because it will happen. And then also bring people in and at the design phase. Don't, we talk about this a lot with Indigenous relations as well. Consultation at the end, once you've already decided what you're going to do, is going to be less impactful. People aren't going to like it as much. And of course, it's not true consultation, right? So bring people in as you're designing something, and you're more likely to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think so much of the time when we're sort of trying to launch something, by the time we've had the idea, it's like, right, let's do this, A, B, C, get it done. And actually missing out that step of bringing people in, you're missing out possibilities.
Absolutely. And things you wouldn't have thought of, right? I mean, I'm not there on the front lines. I don't know, and those people that we brought in could have thought of ideas or ways of operations that I am not aware of.
So Eva, look, I'm just really pleased that we've been able to have this conversation. Already, I've written myself a side note that my own team needs to be aware while trying to work out how to apply something similar, because we too can do better. And I think this idea of engaging people in the design and looking at both the employees and the partnerships that we have, I feel like there's a lot that I've taken from this, and I'm sure others will as well. So thank you so much for being so generous to share your experience and to join me today.
Oh, thank you. This was wonderful. It was really fun. So I'm happy to keep chatting about this anytime.
Great. And you and I are going to meet in just a few days'
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
So I'll look forward to that at
Yes.
Decarb Connect Canada. But thank you for speaking at that, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Hi, Alex Cameron here from Decarb Connect. We're taking a short break in this series so that we can regroup and research our next set of guests. If you'd like to get involved either as a guest or by nominating someone, or if you've got a theme or challenge in the world of industrial decarbonisation that you'd like us to look into, then get in touch with me. The best way to do that is either via LinkedIn or via my email address, ac@decarbconnect.com. We will be back with the next episode of our podcast soon, and until then, take care.
At Jano Media, we recognise that great content has the power to create impactful and positive change for lives and society. Whether that's video, live streams, photography or podcasts, partnering with us will enable you to harness the power of content to engage, inform and inspire. Reach out to us today.